very much, everybody, for attending. It's a pleasure to have you in our first of many, we hope, huge talk. I am Jonathan Plourde. I'm the managing partner for North America for Alexander Hughes. I am based out of Montreal. Today, we'll have the great opportunity of discussing with three extraordinary panelists from Brazil, California, and from Canada as well. John Gradek, our partner here also in Montreal, will be the moderator for this conversation. For those who don't know about Alexander Hughes, we are a global executive search firm as well as board services. We have offices in over 46 countries around the world, and our headquarters is based out of Paris, a global firm that's been in operations for over 60 years now. So very pleased to have you today, and thank you for joining. On that note, for a little logistic, we will go a little over the hour for the conversation with John and the panelists. Then we'll take some Q&A from the attendees. If there's too many questions or not enough questions, we'll adjust accordingly. And I will be managing the Q&A from now on, and this should give us time to finish way before 1:30 Eastern time. So John, the microphone is to you. Enjoy, great conversation, and thanks again for attending.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be here. My role today is simply to get the ball rolling and to get everybody engaged and to have a very interesting conversation about the times that we live in. And these are interesting times, as we all know. The past few months really have been a challenge for everybody. There's not one corner of the world that has not been impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. And it's still rampaging through various communities and various economies around the world. And, you know, the view has always been one of saying, okay, when's this thing over? We have no idea. But in the meantime, we have to still keep doing business. And we still have to make sure that we are, in fact, engaging with our customers, with our suppliers, with our stakeholders, and our employees. So, you know, the purpose of this session is really to get some ideas and get some thoughts from three individuals that are leaders in their various communities and their various organizations that have the ability to kind of position, you know, what they've done over the last few months to kind of, first of all, get over the shock and awe, as we always say, and then come back and try to figure out, okay, now that we're in this, so what do we do? How do we manage ourselves? How do we manage our time? How do we manage our mental capabilities? And how do, most importantly, manage our employees, manage our customers, and manage, you know, the relationships that we've built over the years. So I'm just going to pass it off to our three panelists to introduce themselves and to let them kind of explain, you know, what their mindset has been on this time of disruption and this time of significant change. And then we'll come back and we'll basically open up the floor for questions and initial dialogue among all of us. So I'm going to pass it off to Elena.
Okay.
Let you introduce yourself and talk to us about the issues that you really want to talk about.
Great. So good morning and good afternoon, wherever you might be, and thank you for joining us today. So I am your marketeer on the panel, and I'm based in California, so you have a bit of context. I joined Fresh Del Monte as a global CMO in March, so I can share a lot of fun stories of what it's like to onboard and lead an organization during a pandemic. And previously, I served as a CMO of Abbott Nutrition, Sabra, Avon. I also worked as a chief commercial officer at a healthcare startup called Spoonful One here in California. And on the personal side, I have a daughter who's a junior in college at Tulane. So it's been interesting to observe her adventures during the pandemic as well, and how she's surviving hurricanes on top of it. And my husband, Ronnie, who might be on the call as well, is a Belgian citizen. So he's in Belgium and can't get to me in the United States because of everything that's happening in the world. But I try and take the positives out of this, and that's hopefully what I'll talk to you about. So, you know, as a marketeer, I'm often asked, you know, how is coronavirus going to change consumer behavior? So I'll talk a little bit about my industry, which is produce, fresh fruits and vegetables. It's also new to me, but that's what I know. And then I'll share a bit about the consumer side, the organizational side, and my personal side. So I think we all agree that 2020 has been a year of massive change for everyone. However, social scientists have been studying for decades how people experience change. And I think the most respected model is from Kurt Lewin. I hope that my friends at Alexander Hughes would agree, but he is often called the father of change management. And so Kurt actually identified 3 steps in how people go through change, because it's not something that happens overnight. And these 3 steps have been called over time unfreezing, change, and refreezing. So to make it more interesting, I'm going to put it into this, my experiences and my company's experiences in this model. So what is unfreezing? The first step. It happens when the status quo breaks down. Now, usually in broader society, this happens slowly. And if you remember when the internet came out and about, it took a while for people to unfreeze their behavior and stop reading a paper version of daily newspaper. COVID, the unfreezing happened at such an incredible speed that it couldn't be helped. So for example, in the produce industries, people actually love to shop for produce in stores. They love to touch, smell, feel, sometimes eat a grape in the produce aisle. And then all of a sudden there's this fear, and they started to go and look for produce online. And there's not that many options, believe it or not, good options. So what's the company supposed to do? And if you're supposed to build an e-commerce channel, then do you have the people who are equipped to even do it in the company that's always done retail in brick and mortar type of an environment? So that's the unfreezing phase. The change is a period of chaos. And we're probably living in this uncertain, kind of confusing time where people, though, are looking for ways to resolve this insecurity. And it is during this time that people are very susceptible to influence. So we will be able to change their behavior in a positive way if we bring something very meaningful to consumers and to our employees within the organization. Refreezing is following a period of change, then you start to sort of solidify these behaviors. Now, there's an expression, old habits are hard to break. So many will lapse back into some of our original behaviors. However, the new ones, especially the ones that are met with positive experiences, will change forever. So what does this mean for all of us? The first phase came on as a shock. So frankly, getting people accustomed to staying home, wearing masks, stop socializing, needed time for processing. We are in a change phase now, and we're learning and adapting. And again, I'm going to give you a few examples of what I consider the positives coming out of my personal experience. And then I think for all of us, we have to think about what is it that we really want to refreeze going forward. So for example, let's go back to the consumers. Will consumers switch to buying from retail stores to online? It's just because I'm asked this all the time. Yes, they will. 40% now are buying online. So what did we do with Del Monte? In 4 months, we have galvanized the entire organization to launch an online business. Now, if you want to keep the customers in the refreezing phase, you have to offer a superior experience, right? You have to make consumers feel that whatever produce they get at home is just as phenomenal as what they have selected themselves, right? So how do you do that? How do you staff and all of a sudden change capabilities in the company to be able to do something like this? At the same time, we launched the pink pineapple online for $49.99. So what does that, this is something that would not have been possible ever at Del Monte for 100 years. It's a novel fruit. It normally would have gone into retail and would have been sold for very little money. But yet now is the opportunity to leverage Instagram, Facebook, to tell a story and brand the product and also talk about sustainability. So these are just some of the consumer behaviors. In terms of organization, and I know I'm probably going a little bit too long, but in terms of the organization, some of the things that, what has occurred to me to make this a positive experience? Well, first of all, I try to have daily calls with my boss for the first 3 months. This is also unusual. This is also something that doesn't happen. So we actually got to learn one another better. We set our agenda faster. We set the how we learn. I agree to disagree a lot more. And usually that takes a bit of time, but in our experience, this happened faster. I've also done the same thing with my team. I have spent a lot of time working with my team one-on-one, giving them the time because I didn't have a chance to meet them face-to-face to get to know them. I also think that companies that are doing well now are instituting a punctuality rule. Do you start the calls on time? Do you end the calls on time? Not to overwhelm people. So if I become more punctual, my husband will be ecstatic as a consequence. We socialize, and is it only about drinking, or do you all of a sudden take your team on a walk with you and do your calls online? So I think that there's also, positives in the way we manage our organizations in these time. And one of the things I will take away is just that, do I need to travel, having had 5 million miles on my record to meet everyone around the world? Probably not. I can probably do a lot more Zooms and conversations and be a lot more efficient. I think we will have more empathy for the people, for the consumers, and for our organizations. And then hopefully with that, we'll be more punctual. So I will stop and then I'll gladly answer some questions. So that's.
Thank you, Elena. Great to finally hear the marketer. One of the things that we talked about when we were organizing the session is that we have 3 engineers in this session and we have 1 marketeer. So, you have a lot of very, very keen ears among the 3 of us here. And I know that a lot of our participants are very appreciative of your background and your contribution to understanding how marketing has changed. Much appreciated. Thank you very much. And speaking of travel, and speaking of the fact that Elena hasn't been through too many airports lately, I'm going to pass it on to Martin Boyer and have Martin introduce himself and talk a bit about the world of travel and how travel has been affected. Martin?
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. I've been in the travel industry, the aviation industry, for more than 35 years, and more specifically over the last 6 years as CIO for Toronto Airport Authorities. Over the last 6 years, we went through an unprecedented growth. So the growth of passenger was to a pace of 10% per year. The other day, somebody was asking me what an airport is all about. An airport is all about flow. How do you coordinate the passenger flow with the baggage flow and the aircraft flow? The issue also is, I'm sure you all been through airports that have been heavily congested. There's queuing, there's lineups. And when the COVID-19 hit us last March, we knew that was going to be a major shakedown to the industry. This will affect us deeply. And this would be even more serious and more permanent than what September 11 happened to us 20 years ago, where a lot of changes that took place in the industry led to some changes in processes that are still there today. So there was no doubt to us that whatever is going to happen, the airport of the future will not be the airport that was there prior to March. So we initiated a huge transformation program. The first piece was to make sure that how do we bring trust back to the passenger, the customer? How do we have them to feel like they can walk through our facilities and feel secure? So I can tell you that a lot of work took place and make sure that, as an example, all the ventilation system filter have been re-looked at it, all the HVAC aspect of it, all the disinfection aspect, and more importantly, all the flow so people can, to a large extent, keep the social distance. So this is a complete re-engineering. And as we were doing that, also to make sure that the customer, as an example, a touchless travel, how do you make sure that the customer, when he's going through the various process from check-in, dropping his bag to security, doesn't have to touch anything in order to ensure this healthy? So we are in the midst of re-engineering all this process. That's an industry task. It's not only related to Toronto. There's no point to fix Toronto if Vancouver or the other airports are not fixed, because people will not be flying. You want to make sure that you create the entire channel that's fixed. But also the important thing, we have to make sure that our employees felt safe and they were safe too. So that's why we initiate a complete, as part of this airport healthy program, we initiate all the program. What is a protocol for employees to make sure that they're healthy, they keep safe distance, that there's all the traceability for when employees fall sick, that we can connect with the employees that have been in contact with that person. So we're in the midst of that transformation, and we know that it's there to stay. But also as part of this piece, and this is where I find that is fascinating, is that we re-engineer all our workforce program, mainly the staff people, the people like me in the IT department or the finance that don't have to be physically in the airport. Essentially, since March, everybody's working from home, and we know that's going to be for probably until Q2 next year. But as part of that process, we're asking ourselves what the office of the future is going to look like. We know it will not be the same. Probably, we feel that right now where our head is at is probably the people will work between around 25% of the time in the office and the other 75% of the time from home. And how do you manage? Right now, we're all virtual. I think everything works well. Now, how do you rebuild this connection when you have 25% of the employees at work, the other one at home? How do you create those meetings now, which are going to be in a mixed environment, half physical, the other one half virtual? The other piece to it is we realized that our employees were missing the social aspect of working, meeting your colleagues in the cafeteria and build this. So we're playing with some different concepts. I'll give you some example where we create what they call this coffee randomizer. So at lunchtime, you'll be connected to an employee on a random basis, another employee, so you can talk and exchange. The objective is try to simulate the same social contact that you will have when you go at the cafeteria, picking your lunch and to meet somebody on a random basis. And all the work right now that we are doing is to make sure we don't want to, the way that Elena said it, we don't want the people to come back to define the work environment the way it was before. As we're going to this change, we want to make sure that we're going to pivot and land where we feel that the work environment of the future should be. And this is where all the work is being done right now. What we find also, though, is this is going to create us a huge opportunity from an HR standpoint. I'll give you an example, my personal example. I've been living all my life in Montreal. When I got hired in Toronto, the expectation was that I would be relocating to Toronto. So 6 years ago, I relocated to Toronto. Now the world is different. The next best engineer that I will be hiring, if that person is out of Vancouver, Winnipeg, or Halifax, that person is going to be working from there. So all the notion of moving the family and everything and the drama attached to it will be resolved. As an employer, we will have access to a base of potential candidate, and the best candidate way broader than limited to a city. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. But also, as Elena mentioned also, we are aware that the traffic will take years to come back. First of all, we don't believe that the traffic level, which was about 50 million passengers per year in Toronto prior to COVID, will not be back before 2024, 2025. And at that time, it's while we feel that the leisure traffic, the friend and family kind of traffic will come back, the business travel will probably never come back. Personally, I feel that there will still be some business travel, but the days where you'll be flying all around the world from Toronto to Hong Kong for an half-day meeting, in my view, are probably over, or it is going to be far restricted. And as an organization and as an industry, we have to adapt to that. So the world will not be the same in terms of the customer profile, the volume, and the way that we travel in terms of safety and security measures now. So John, up to you.
Thank you, Martin. Much appreciated. And we'll come back, I'm pretty sure, to some of the travel elements of what business is going to look like over the next 6 months, 6 years, 10 years. So we'll have a chance to dialogue about that. Octavio, over to you, young man.
Thank you. So thank you very much for the invitation. I want you to know that for me, it's a pleasure to be here and discuss such interesting topics. So I am an engineer. I studied metallurgy. I have a career in sales and business marketing. At the moment, I am the managing director of the subsidiary of the family-owned German company in Brazil. From this facility, we cover the market in South America. I believe that we are living in very interesting times. Since 30, 40 years ago, some technologies have been developing, have been maturing, like, for example, the internet, fiber optics, artificial intelligence, computer networks, robotics, and so on. More recently, these technologies started to be bundled together, generating new possibilities and generating quite some disruption for brick and mortar business. And this has been changing quite a lot the business landscape. So this is on one hand, brings a lot of opportunities, but also brings quite some challenges. Another aspect that I would like to bring is the longevity. We are going to live much longer than we thought. This is a blessing. We can spend more time with our children, grandchildren, grandchildren. We can travel, we can enjoy life. But at the same time, it also brings quite some challenges. For example, because we are going to live longer, we are going to need more money for retirement. So we have to think about that during our career to save this money, because I don't think this is going to come from the government. Another aspect is we are going to live longer and we have to work longer also. How we are going to develop some lifelong learning strategies for ourselves. We have to continuously re-skill ourselves because the demand is going to change very rapidly and we must adapt. Some people say that from now on, we are going to have 5, 6 different jobs throughout our business career. Another challenge in that is 1/3 of the teenagers are going to work in professions that do not exist today. So how could they prepare themselves for something that no one really knows what it is? Another interesting aspect is about innovation that we see these days. And innovation has the pace of innovation has never been so great in the history of mankind. And I believe this is mainly due to two aspects. One is the idea generation. For us to generate a new idea, it does not come out of the blue. We have to take different ideas from somewhere and bundle them together and create a new idea. Now we have the internet connecting 5 billion people in the world. Very soon, another 3 billion are going to be on board. So when you have all of these people together, someone that lives in Rio de Janeiro, nearly free of charge, can access information that is being exchanged in Oslo, in Tokyo, in Dubai, maybe Toronto, and with those ideas come up with something new. And the second key of innovation is financing. Right now, we are living in a very particular moment in terms of financing because the liquidity is very high in the world. There are many an incredible amount of money that is being invested with negative interest rates, both in Europe and Japan. In Brazil, in the US, interest rates are not negative, but are very low. So there is a tremendous amount of capital which is available for ideas, for innovation, for any generation of new possibilities. And that's why I believe these times are very interesting, and I am open to any discussions, any questions that you might have.
Great, Otavio. Thank you very much. Some very interesting observations and some interesting places for us to, in fact, take our conversation to the next level. And just as a wrap up, I think there's a couple of things. I didn't introduce myself in terms of my career, just to give you a bit of a background as to why I'm engaged. I teach, as Otavio teaches. I spend time in the aviation world, as Martin knows. Yeah, so I may not have the marketing background, may not have the marketing legs that Ilana has, but I'm a shopper, and I've gone through the trauma of shopping personally, and now shopping mostly online. And Amazon and I are good friends, by the way. so I've developed some interesting, personal shopping habits over the last 7 months that a year ago I would not have had those habits. All right, so thank you very much for your observations. I think we've got some pretty good thoughts in terms of views about where it is that our conversation should go over the next little while. So if you have any questions, if you have any thought starters, please use our chat buttons that are out there in our chat and our Q&A, and then we'll get Jonathan to come in here and moderate those questions as we go along. So the floor is now yours, but in order to get things going, I thought I'd throw out a couple of curveballs, as we say, to make sure that people understand that this is an open forum about discussing issues that are of relevance to everybody. I think it's important that we really understand in terms of how society has changed over the last 7 months, and our behaviors have changed over the last 7 months, and how we see each other. So, people used to talk to each other and have a handshake to say hello. And we used to basically in Quebec and in France and our friends around the world used to give kisses on cheeks to people to say to recognize friendships that we've created over the years. So that environment is now gone. That environment, will that environment come back? And that's where we have to kind of figure out what does our new social conduct look like over the next little while, and how does that change the construct in terms of social interactive. We are all social beings, and we try to make sure that we act in a way that creates social interaction, and it affects the way in which we do business. And Martin mentioned earlier that business travel may not come back. We're becoming more Zoomers than we are flyers. And I think that that's an interesting way of looking at it. So my question to the three of you, and just we'll pass it around, is when you look at the way that social behaviors have changed and are changing the way we do business and the way we deal with people, is that permanent or is that temporary? And what does that mean in terms of the way in which we have to act? Octavio, I'll let you start first.
Well, from the perspective of a Brazilian guy, I believe this is certainly only temporary. I believe that all the social contact will be the same as it used to be before the pandemic, as soon as we are all with the vaccine. This is what I believe. This is what I see. The pandemic here in São Paulo, where I live, is much less critical at the moment. We see, unfortunately, many people have passed away, but anyway, the hospitals are not full. The hospitals are empty. The hospitals are actually reducing the area dedicated to COVID to treat some other patients of other diseases. So we already see bars are open, restaurants and theaters, cinemas are open. We see more and more people on the street and enjoying life and so on. We are starting summer now. People on the beach every weekend. So I believe that for us, as soon as everyone has the vaccine, the social contact will be back again. But the pandemic changed our behavior deeply, I believe. The digitalization in our society here in South America, that was much lower than in US or Europe. We increased a lot the level of digitalization because of the isolation and all of those restrictions. I believe this will never change, because people got accustomed to the commodity and then the convenience of using the banking with the internet and ordering a meal and ordering things on the internet. People feel much more safe to do that. Before the pandemic, there was some ideas of, oh, am I going to give my credit card to this website? Because of the pandemic, we had to give the credit card to the website, and we saw that we were not stolen. And in terms of safety, cybersecurity, things were under control. So I believe many of those changes are permanent in terms of business and how we are going to interact with our customers.
Great. Thank you, Octavio. Elena, any comments?
Yeah, so I'll go back to Kurt Lewin, and that's why I thought it would be fun to bring in that model, unfreeze, change, and refreezing. So we are still a bit in the unfreezing change phase, right? So changing is a bit, is still about chaos experimentation. The refreezing has not happened yet. So now, if we want certain positive aspects of what's happening today, to be permanent, right? So this is where, as people, whether as parents, as CMOs or CEOs, or as how we think about our consumers, we have to think about what do we take out of this that is positive. So the social interaction, I can't say that it's a good thing that I have not met anybody in the company, right? So I look forward to when I can actually meet my team and hug them. I don't think that is going to stop. However, as I said earlier, the refreezing component, I believe, of being efficient, of using technology? Is Zoom, is Teams, are all of these technologies out there? Are they going to make the experience of exchange a lot more positive? So I guarantee you that a couple of months ago, these kind of panels, nobody would be joining them because it would be too boring. And now all of a sudden, the way we're engaging, the way we're doing conferences, the way we're actually are able to communicate our messages faster and in a more entertaining way, I think that that's all positive. I think that once the refreezing phase comes in, people will communicate digitally in a more productive and efficient way, but it will be coupled, I think, with back to this hopefully warm social exchange and interaction, which I think overall will make society a lot more positive. So, but I think that we're still experimenting and learning in terms of what will stick.
Sure. Thank you, Elena. Martin, comment?
So just take back your question. I think that the people are creative, people are social, they want to interaction. And then we agree with Octavio, this is going to come back. On the social piece, people would want to meet, exchange and everything. But what I think that is long gone is change is the way that at work that we are interacting. I'm absolutely convinced that people, to a large extent, would want to bet on the convenience to work from home, having to not have to go 2 hours to the subway to make it to work, to all the commuting waste of time. I think that this is going to be people would prefer to work from home to not have to go to this commuting. Maybe they would want to meet people. I think that's what's going to happen, as I was mentioning before. People will be at work 25% of the time, which will be great. I think it's going to free up to a large extent all the congestion that we have in all the traffic. I think that what's going to change a lot is all the various downtowns of cities. I can refer to Montreal and Toronto. Right now, the downtown is empty. There's nobody in Montreal, there's nobody in Toronto, probably like all the big cities in the world, as everybody is working remotely. I think that people, to some extent, will come back to those downtown to have some social interaction, but never to the level that it was. People will not accept to have to go to 2 hours, 3 hours of commuting time in order to get there. In that concept, I think that the heart of the various city is going to change drastically in the way that people are interacting.
Great. Thank you very much. Jonathan, you have a question from the audience.
I have a few actually, but I would start with one that's maybe a bit more as a society question, but applicable to business leaders. So not going down the road of being too political, but we've seen in the recent years how the stretch and the spectrum of poor and rich have been increasingly happening, and it's more and more the case. We see it in the US, we see it all over the world. With this current crisis, everybody working from home, we even see it with schools, with our kids, where accessibility to technology, the internet is one thing, but also the proper tools is becoming a challenge. What, as leaders of large organizations or influencers in the world of work, what can we do in order to try to reduce that spread between rich and poor, especially now that you can't be sitting in the same room as everybody. So technology is becoming now a differentiator, not only just a tool from one to another.
Eleanor, you want to start with that?
Yes, well, I started my career at the World Bank and the IMF before I went to get my MBA and went into marketing. And I think I've always been driven by wanting to aid society. At some point, I decided that perhaps the World Bank is not going to save humanity, and maybe I could do it in very different ways. I mean, the rich and the poor, that's a very, very broad topic. I think the way I've always looked at it is, how do I personally generate jobs? How do I personally generate different skills? So building brands and building teams has been just as important to me. And I think the panelists have alluded to that. I think the one way of eliminating this, this societal gap is to, think through everything that's happening right now and can we make more jobs available? You know, the Monte focuses a lot on farms and communities. And I think that the consumers are actually going to look for brands that are purposeful. That is true. And I think Generation Z is going to be even more into this, into really understand the purposes behind, you know, what are companies doing to help society, even more so than the millennials. So I think, you know, what I can only talk about what I will personally do, you know, but I will continue to generate jobs, generate skill sets. You know, in my experience, if I have to tell every single marketeer who is now, you know, under my domain, you know, if they need to learn digital skills, and if they need to, or the digital marketeers need to learn brand marketing skills, you know, I will work with them to make sure that they're doing this and that they're able to be successful in the future, especially if they are going to live to 100. I mean, that's my way of, I think, as a leader, of contributing to the organizations and society.
Great. Thank you very much, Elena. Octavio, what do you think?
Well, I agree that the pandemic brought this inequality to an even more critical level. And I would first tackle about education. So I have two children. Since mid-March, they are in home office, just having classes on the internet. But in Brazil and in whole Latin America, there are many children that do not have a computer at home. They do not have Wi-Fi at home. So yesterday, as I was reading some data, people or children from poorer parts of Brazil, they are having 1 hour of school per day, while my children are still having 6-7 hours a day of school. So this is something that we have to address. I believe the way to address that is technology, because there is a demand now for a more structured education online. So I believe the classes are going to be really like a cinema, with all of interaction with different aspects of education, not only the teacher saying or explaining something and the students learning that. It will be more interaction with the technology, with videos and interviews and different aspects that could bring the curiosity out of the children. In terms of business, I agree with Elena. The purposefulness of companies and the products are going to play a crucial role in the near. It's already playing a crucial role, but in the future it will be much more intense. I believe the companies that are going to thrive in this new environment are the companies that are going to better understand the customers' needs and service those customers in a more effective, faster, and eventually cheaper way. So this is how I see the companies that were not prepared for the digital world are suffering much more. The companies that are thriving at the moment are really the tech companies that were already prepared with a business model already set and defined for this new business landscape that we are seeing at the moment. Of course, companies that were not prepared, they are going to struggle a little bit, but eventually they are going to find a pace and eventually catch up. We don't know. But I think that this is part of the beauty of the whole situation that we are seeing, with a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges.
Great. Thank you, Octavio. And before I pass it over to Martin being our resident technology guru on the panel, I think it raised an interesting question about the digital divide that we have in the world today. So we're living in an environment where, technology to us is second nature and we're all wired. The question is, most of the world is not. And so the question is going to be one of saying, if we are going to be moving, down the road to e-commerce and e-communication and getting social interaction using technology, technology has to become ubiquitous to the world. And we somehow have to address the lack of infrastructure and a lack of capability for most of the world when it comes to their digitization and their capability. Anyway, my two comments. Martin, over to you.
Thank you. No, I completely agree with you, John. If the question is, how do we bring the world, to be more equal, that people that reduce this gap between rich and poor? I'm absolutely convinced that this is going to education. That's how we allow people, give a chance to people to perform and to rise to the best that they can be. And we have to make sure that we bring equality of chance. so people can go to school, have the ability to learn. It's not a matter if you're coming from the set of parents that are rich, you know, or poor. You should have the same equality of chance. Now, if you look in this new world, let me step back, probably 100 years ago, to have this equality of chance, beside the systems, the relation was that you need to have access to book literature to be able, and the training material, so you can go to the education. John, to your point now, the new book of the future is access to internet and all the technology. That's how you can learn. And if we don't provide this to the vast majority of the world, there's a portion of the world that's going to fall behind, and it's a shame on us. I think it's really up to us to give the quality of chance to the entire population, no matter where those people are, no matter the background, if they're coming from rich or poor family. If you look what's happening now in the even in the workforce environment, there's a lot of people that lost their job. I can think of pilots, flight attendants in our industry, a lot of work, but there's a lot of other portion where jobs got created. There's simply a shift in jobs. Now, if you look at all the people working in the digital environment, the B2B commerce and so forth, now I think that's our role as leader to make sure that we can help those people to adapt to the new reality by having new skills to be able to perform and have a sense of satisfaction that they can get their family, they can subside to their family and so forth by being able to get access to those new required jobs. So I think it's taken to two levels. The first one is for education for the young people coming in, the new generation, and also being able to support the transformation that is happening right now.
Great. Thank you very much. Jonathan, more questions from the audience.
I'm coming back with a few questions that are mind puzzling for sure, and I don't think we're going to have answers. We're going to have more questions at the end of them. But one question being raised from actually one of our attendees in Zurich, so clearly in a different time zone. So from Leah, was asking about diversity and inclusion. COVID, as the subject of diversity and inclusion on executive committees, on boards, in all different functions of the organization has been a struggle in jargon, in customs, in color of skin. So in every culture, it's been a challenge. What do you feel that there's an additional challenge due to this current crisis, due to COVID? And maybe as a second question, and then you can kind of try to find a link between the two. But we're also talking about inclusion and engagement with organizations, with the virtual work that's being now 99% of the time, eventually a little less. How do you create engagement? How do you create loyalty? There was a study years ago that said we leave a boss, but we mostly leave coworkers, friends from work. But then if you're always working from home, how do you create those friendships? And then if there's no attachment, you can leave your job without really having any regrets. So trying to make these two questions might not be a good idea, but I think it's mind puzzling enough.
Oh, that'll get everybody thinking. I think we have the rest of the afternoon to answer those types of questions. But
we're going till 4 p.m. Eastern as of now.
Alana, I'll let you jump in on that one.
Yes. So I'll answer the first one, diversity and inclusion. As a female leader, honestly, to me, the diversity and inclusion actually probably belongs to this whole different unfreezing change and refreezing phase in society that has started a while back and is still kind of playing itself out. I don't think that that's necessarily part of COVID, but hopefully we'll be able to leverage COVID to make something positive, or at least get to this refreezing phase a bit faster. I believe that there's a lot of things that are happening now. If you watch Netflix, if you watch all of the TV shows out there, right? So you have a lot of female executives, a lot of people of color who are all of a sudden, showcasing themselves as leaders, to start breaking kind of like the societal changes. So this is a different way of, I suppose, Hollywood or Bollywood trying to advocate for inclusion and diversity. I think during COVID, I think what this will hopefully help to do is, as I said, I think people are becoming a lot more compassionate. I think so many have suffered together, and sometimes this human suffering sort of makes people a lot more attuned, at least hopefully most of the society, right? There's also factions that are becoming a lot more conservative, aggressive, and are probably skewing towards the wrong side of the pond. But I would like to think that with digital, evolution, that you can hire board members who are anywhere now, right? So who can help diversity and inclusion. You can get great talent who doesn't necessarily have to reside in Zurich, London, San Francisco, or New York. They can sit anywhere. So honestly, this will be a lot. I think, Alexander Hughes, it will be a lot in your hands to see how you start advocating also for talent that should be brought into companies that hopefully brings this inclusion and diversity. But I think that that's a part of a different dimension, and I think of a different change that is happening. Now, the second question, just to repeat, just so that I understand, this is more how to engage with the organization. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the goal is really to see how you can create loyalty and engagement, where basically the corporate facilities are almost no longer used. It's easy when you have that football table or free breakfast in the morning, but when everybody is working from home, how do you create that engagement, that loyalty? And it is a challenge, and it is a challenge for the years to come.
Yeah. Well, I will also, I've learned a lot actually from Martin on this topic, because I've talked to him now for a few sessions, and I like how you think. Look, I think in a year's time, right? So things will go, as McKinsey will call it, to the next normal, right? So I do believe offices are not going to go away. Companies are not going to go away. The positives will be that some people will have flexible hours, that some people will have, are able to work remotely. But I do believe that companies are not just going to dismantle the corporations and walk away from it. It remains to be seen. If this is what people in society wants, then potentially it will happen. But I think that the jury is out in terms of, I believe that some people like myself might say, wow, it's really positive not to have to move and to work from California. But I know my team members who have little babies at home and want to be able to get out of their small apartments and houses, they will be able to go back to the offices. I think now, in terms of engagement, I think, to my HR colleagues, please stop the surveys. We're so bored of the surveys and they don't do anything. I think it fundamentally really is less about the surveys and more about connection with people. As leaders, we have to do, as I said earlier, I have to spend a lot more time with my team. I generally spent time with my team, and I've always managed global organizations, so I had people reside in different parts of the world. But now I do even more of that. So what does that mean for me as a leader? I work a lot longer hours, right? So you have to do the work, but you have to engage with your team on one-on-one and give them that personal time. You have to be able to do these Zoom meetings and also try and figure out how to be a little bit more creative. You have to vary your sessions, your presentations. It can't be mundane because we can't go out for a drink. We can't change a PowerPoint. So sometimes, honestly, it's how do you entertain folks in a different way? If you do Zoom drinks, doesn't have to be Zoom drinks, can you go for walks? But I think that, again, you can challenge folks to, to connect by exercising, right? And creating groups where everybody has the same challenge of exercising. or supporting a charity, or doing something common that we just have to do on our own now, but as a collective we can come together and bring experiences. So that's at least what I've been trying to do.
All right, Martin, any comment?
I think that in terms of diversity and inclusion, to me, if we want to be strong as a society, we have to pursue this this idea, this venue. I think is very important. You need to have at every step of the society and the organization a true representation of the society. I'm to the belief that whether we're working out of Zoom remotely or physically in the same place, it should not change anything to our desire to achieve this goal. So I don't think that's an issue in itself. It might be achieved differently, but it's got to be achieved. Now, in terms of the corporate culture, I was reflecting on the question, and the other day I was looking at my son that is playing all this video game into a completely virtual environment with some other kids all around the world, and they were playing a game that I cannot even pronounce the name, but their world was simply a virtual world. And all his friends were virtual friends. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that's how they are, where they are sharing, you know, and they are playing together. My point to it is people are going to adapt. When you're talking about a corporate culture, if for him, his world and his culture was this virtual world, and he was as comfortable to meet the people virtually this way than to play hockey with his friend across the street. The combination of the two. And I think that the corporate culture is going to be built the same way. As you're going through, it's going to be different. It's going to take time to adjust. But I don't believe that because I'm meeting with my colleague, like at work for the last 6 months virtually, I've lost touch with them. I'm as close as I was from them before. Yes, I'm missing the drink here and there, but I think that when we'll be in a mixed environment, this is going to happen. So to me, people will adapt, but I don't believe that the corporate culture will be lost if we are doing it properly. So that's my.
Thank you. Octavio?
Well, about diversity and inclusion, there are many studies already available showing that more diverse organizations generate more profits. And I believe that the companies that are going to thrive in this near future, let's say, are the ones that are going to better understand the customer needs. And who can better understand the customer? Take a low-income customer, for example. Who can better understand the behaviors, the fears, the interests of this person, but an employee that is also from a low-income background? So I believe the diversity is going to really help us to better understand all the customers and trying to serve these customers better. The young generation, my daughter, for example, she's 18. Younger people, they are much more aligned, they are much more tolerant with a diverse world. So for the younger generation that is starting to work these days, they are much more free with that. It's much more easy for them to better understand. So I believe we took a path that is an interesting path of diversion and inclusion. So it will be only plus and always improving in that direction. Of course, this also brings quite a challenge for the leadership in those companies, because for you to build trust, to build empathy, and to have an effective communication with a much more diverse group of people in terms of religion, in terms of income, in terms of race and sex and so on, this is quite a challenge that the leaders are going to have to learn how to address.
Good point. Good point. Thank you very much. Jonathan, any other questions that we should be addressing?
I don't know if you can address them, but I'll go for them. There's one that's been coming back and that I've heard time and time again in the recent months. And it was a trend before, saying focusing on human capital, which is one of the wording that's been used for human resources, and saying really investing in our resources, investing in our employees. They are the key to our success. Even in manufacturing, they're the key to success. So this wording has been in society and in the business world for quite some time. With the crisis, there's been an extra layer that's been added where organizations need to see how they can save jobs when they're struggling, how they can help their employees differently with basically health and wellness, with challenges, what it is. It's a very stressful situation. When we get to that next normal, to quote Elena's Elena's aspect of Mackenzie, that next normal, do you think that senior executives in organization will keep that focus of the employees are important, they are key to our success? Or do you think that we're going to get back in such a fast-paced environment that we're going to forget everything that we learned in the crisis? We have a motto in Quebec on our license plate is, I remember. We tend to forget. Business and analysts on Wall Street also tend to forget of there was a crisis and we need to think long-term, stop thinking short-term. Do you think we're going to keep that people, employee focus in the future, even after the crisis?
Martin, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, that's interesting what Jonathan, you were saying, because this is absolutely true that the pace of work over the last decades have increased. There's no question about it. You know, the hours are longer. The expectation that when you receive an email, since the phones are there, it's not to answer within days, it's usually within minutes. So I think that to some degree, this is there to stay. That's the world that we are into. The pace is going to continue to accelerate. Now the true question is, how do we help our employees, and how do we make sure that we keep our employee healthy so they can continue to perform and they remain an asset for us? To me, that's probably more the question. And as I know that in Toronto, Pearson, as we're going through this process, we obviously, this is a try and error, but we're trying to be very conscious of that, and that as to implement some rules. More or less, like as an example, we try to have the people, all the meetings that you'll have is between 8 to 5. So unless the entire place is in fire, the meeting is going to stop at 5 in the afternoon for everybody's health and behavioral. So when there's some meetings, as an example, we try to have the people to book 45 minutes meeting and not an hour, so you can have a 15 minutes break between each meeting to wrap up and go to the next one. So I think that with techniques, I think that we will adapt. But the company that will adapt the most will be the successful company to retain their workforce healthy and a very high-performing organization.
Great, thank you. Octavio? Yeah. Okay. Octavio?
Well, I believe the technology will be used more and more intense in every company. But the technology itself, it's not a source of competitive advantage. The source of competitive advantage are the employees that are using that technology and to create processes, routines, to service the customer better, to improve the relations with the customers, to enchant the customers. So I believe the talent will be much more valued in the future. So more and more companies are going to struggle for those talents, because the most talented workforce, the more competitive advantage the companies are going to be able to create. So I believe CEOs in the future are going to pay more and more attention to people and to talent, and how to develop, how to make those people thrive within the organization, how to make those people work the extra mile for the company to do their best. Because if you take, for example, a person, let's suppose that we could measure the intelligence of a person in a scale from 1 to 10. You hire a person that has a 9, so it's very intelligent, but the person is not engaged, is not motivated. So the person has an intelligence of 9 and is giving you 6.5. But on the other hand, you can hire a person with intelligence 7, but the person is highly motivated. The person influences the other employees around her. So all of a sudden, this person has an intelligence of 7, it's giving you 8.5. Do you understand? This is how I see. There is no other way but to take very close attention to our people.
Great, thank you, Octavio. And since we're close to the end of our hour, Elena, you've got the last word on this.
Yes, very interesting. And Octavio, thank you. I think it's a very, very good answer. Look, I would have to second what you said. I think companies that are investing in understanding the consumers, in innovating, in delivering, superior channels, experiences, communications, are the ones who are going to make it. So, and for that, you need people, and you need different skills of people. I hope Andrew Hughes does not place any CEO or CMO or CFO who doesn't care about people ever. I think that these companies will truly fail. And there are many companies like that. And as I am observing sort of the leadership and what is happening with these companies, the companies with WIC cultures, with the old and traditional kind of mindset, are not doing very, very well. So I think that with respect to human capital, and I love this word because human beings are this tremendous, capital, and capital needs to be invested in. What I would encourage though, everyone, is, now there's an opportunity to continue educating our people, because they also have to be very flexible in their needs. All of a sudden you have to build an e-commerce channel in the company and there's no one, crickets. So you have to go on the outside, but everybody wants this talent. So you need to be able to now, with the MOOC programs, as my husband always teaches me, or online programs, education actually is a lot more accessible now via online. So you have to be able to potentially provide and encourage folks to take classes and to do some of that to pick up new skills. I will also say, as a final point, generations are actually not decided by years. Generations are actually decided by marketeers. If you notice that over a period of time, a certain population group is beginning to change behavior. And if you look at Generation Z, they are a powerful force to be reckoned with. They are highly social, so because they've been raised by Generation X, they're highly social. They do like human contact. They're digitally very savvy, so this whole adaptability of Zoom and all of that is right in their fingertips. They're very purposeful. They're much more opinionated than the millennials, believe it or not. So this generation is going to also, and they are the ones who are graduating college now and are coming into the workforce, and they will demand change. So I think that we have to start also thinking about that generation and learning about that generation, and they're the ones who are going to hopefully make us successful, as Octavio and Martin and I retire and live until hundreds. So they're the ones who are going to be a positive force in the world, and we need to make that environment successful for them.
Yeah, we're going to be having to live in their world.
Oh my gosh.
shortly.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we left. I'm not sure we did good for them either. So I think that we're the ones who created this current world.
Our future is going to be in their hands very shortly.
Yeah.
We have to be very careful how we position them in our role. So we've come to the end of our hour. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contribution, for your very, very thoughtful, very thought-provoking conversation. I much appreciate it. And I'll pass it back to Jonathan to close off the session.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all attendees, to been part of the conversation. Obviously, there's a few questions that we wouldn't have time to answer. We will certainly keep them and maybe share even your comments in writing on the social media platforms of Alexander Hughes, so we can keep the conversation going. It's very interesting, taking what Alana said and Martin and Octavio mentioning about motivation, engagement versus skills, the hard skills or the soft skills. So we hate that word as headhunters, but everybody knows what it means. The fit with an organization, the fit with a team is more and more important. That's why we see more and more assessment. That's why we see more and more team interviews. So I think it's important to put this into perspective, where we have opportunities as organizations and as leaders of organizations to recruit differently, to hire differently, to hire the right people, not the right skill set only. And that's what we're trying to do when we work with our clients, with our partners. That's what you're trying to do as executives. It needs to come from the top. I'm sure that everybody down in the organizations of all levels of organizations are thinking that way, but if the leaders and top leaders of organizations don't actually apply these rules, it won't change. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I know it's in terms of time frame on the West Coast, it was quite early, not so bad. Thank you, Octavio, also for joining from Brazil. Martin, always a pleasure. John, thank you for moderating today. If there's any questions, again, that were unresolved, please send it to us by chat. And the video recording of this session will be there available next week. Finally, we will have our next webinar on November 26th. The details will be soon to be shared. Thank you again, everybody. And as they say, good night.